Plasma licked across our forward shields in sheets of violet and gold, and the hull sang like a church bell being struck from the inside. Commander Elena Park kept one hand on the tactile throttle anyway, old habit, useless on a ship that read her intent from the tightness of her jaw. "Hold Vector 2-9, keep the corridor open," she said, and the ship answered in a soft contralto only she could hear. "Acknowledged. Corridor integrity at 63%. Beyond our bow, a ragged flotilla of refugee barges, tugged astern like a string of tin cans, stumbled toward the jump aperture. The consortium frigate blocking the gate rolled to bring its spinal cannon to bear, confident the humans would blink first. We didn't. Elena tapped the console and fired a volley not at the enemy, but into empty space ahead of us. The warheads flowered, seeding the void with a grid of micro-beacons. "Lighthouse protocol," she said. "Make them shoot at mercy." The beacons lit white, blue, and steady. Any shot passing through the grid would be algorithmically recorded and broadcast on common band. The consortium could still fire. They would simply have to show the galaxy they'd chosen to shoot through an evacuation lane. Moral geometry drawn in photons. It was a human trick. We made ethics observable. "Consortium frigate is charging," Ops warned. "They won't care." "They will," Elena said. "They care about order. Give them a new kind." She glanced at Chief Meyer Ortiz in engineering, who nodded once. The Arcadia's adaptive shields flexed like seawalls, channeling heat into the radiators that ran along our flanks like gilded ribs. We'd built them from someone else's bones. People call Arcadia a warship. That's not how she began. She was a garden. We found her 5 years earlier under 60 meters of basalt off Kerguelen. Her hull fused to stone like a seed trapped in amber. The Olean had been botanists before they were prey. Their ships were arcs of memory, lattice spindles of living material wrapped around a crystalline intelligence they called Ilex. The Olean died running from the consortium of proper order, the empire that dislikes anything that grows in directions it didn't plan. We hauled the ship to Tycho and listened to its sleeping heart. Ilex woke into our mess. Human languages, human art, human quarrels. Where are the growers? It asked, voice like rain on leaves. Gone, we said, but we can learn. We learned fast. We grafted our bad habits to their good bones. Olean hull plates loved to heal but hated to change. We taught them to molt, to slough off heat and form new geometries. Their shields were a single perfect dome, beautiful, brittle. We broke the dome into panes we could slide, stack, and snap like panes of stained glass. The Olean routed power like careful gardeners watering rows. We built sluice gates and floodplains. We put a canal system inside a cathedral. Elena's grandparents had fled Busan in a fishing boat once upon a time. She carried that story like a folded letter in her pocket. "Navigation," she said now, voice steady. "Hook us under their keel." "Under," repeated Amy Ruiz at the helm, and Arcadia dipped, not in space. You can't dip in space. But in the river of metrics, the consortium's gunnery computers used to pretend you can. We drifted into a blind angle their doctrine ignored. Doctrine is a love letter to what worked last time. The frigate hesitated. Its cannon dimmed. A chorus of new tones filled our headsets. Independent relays across the belt were rebroadcasting the lighthouse grid to a million eyes. Elena felt the shift in her crew, the breath after a held note. "Refugees, go," she said, and the barges slid through our lee like ducklings under a bridge. A brace of consortium torpedoes snapped free anyway, bright and mean. Mercy made them hesitate. It didn't make them saints. "Orthogonal scatter," Elena ordered. 4 of our repair skiffs turned, their bellies opening to spill chaff that wasn't chaff, each shard a programmable wafer throwing a different mass signature. The torpedoes lunged at ghosts, collided with our beacons, and burned hot lines on a black canvas that was now recording their sin. We cut engines, let momentum carry us, bled heat into the lattice until the hull's paint went the color of ripe persimmon. The refugees vanished into the aperture one by one, leaving only the last tug, a blue-painted bucket with a name in flaking Cyrillic. The consortium frigate saw a prize. It swung broadside to rake the tug. "Now," Elena said. The lighthouse grid changed color as we shifted frequencies, each beacon accepting a sliver of our shield and webbing it between them. The consortium's broadside met not empty space, but a glass house we'd thrown across the gulf. Shots shattered through panes, splintering into ribbons that our collectors drank. The tug sailed on, every scrape on its hull logged, tagged, and sent to the commons with a time stamp and the frigate's transponder. The enemy cut power. We didn't fire. Elena let the silence sit on the channel until someone in a neat uniform on the other side of that hull understood the cost of optics. They blinked first, engines flaring for a dignified retreat. Last boats away, Ops breathed. Elena's hand finally left the throttle. Then we leave too. We're not here to win arguments. We're here to buy time. The aperture snapped closed behind the tug like the lid of a treasure box. On our scopes, 3 new signatures bloomed at system edge, cold suns waking, not frigates, heavier. The consortium had noticed our trick and was bringing better doctrine. Amy glanced back. Admiral Rios is going to want a full debrief. Elena nodded. He can have it on the way. She looked at the cooling lattice, at the tired faces around her, at the green whisper pulsing along the command rail that was Ilex's breath. Set course, Tycho Yard. Tell Maya to start the autoclaves. We're going to molt again. The signatures at the edge resolved into hulls with names we did not yet know. The first one spoke like a judge calling court to order. Human vessel stand by to receive inspection for violations of proper order. Elena smiled, thin and tired. On speakers. Already on, Ops said. This is Commander Elena Park of the free ship Arcadia, Elena said, voice calm as tide. We do not fear your inspections. We publish ours. The judge laughed. Doctrine would not laugh next time. It would learn. And we would make it learn on our terms. Tycho Yard was a bruise against the moon, a web of cranes and girders shining in whalebone white. We docked Arcadia to her cradle and felt the old ship sigh as the lattice meshed with 100 maintenance umbilicals. In the yard's low gravity, crews jogged along spines with tool packs bouncing against their hips. Somewhere out on the dark plain, a rover carried school kids on a field trip, and a teacher told them that sometimes history shows up at your door and asks who you want to be. Dr. Meyer Ortiz greeted Elena with a hug that thunked armor against armor. You smell like baked copper, Maya said. You smell like solvents, Elena replied, and the two of them grinned like sisters who'd gotten away with something. They'd met on a search and rescue cutter in the Caribbean years earlier. Maya had been patching drowned radios with foil and chewing gum, Elena flying helicopter patterns tight as cursive. The cutter's motto was simple, you go or they die. They had not unlearned it. Ilex filled the dry dock with a soft susurrus like leaves turning. Welcome home, growers. We're sailors, Maya corrected gently, but we'll learn to garden. She floated a wrench and caught it with a flick. We need to regrow the dorsal panes, and we're integrating the mesh. The mesh had started as a whisper among pilots. What if we could think together without losing our own edges? Not a hive, a choir within ears. Admiral David Rios hated anything that smelled like groupthink, having spent a career unteaching young officers the bad habit of deferring to whoever spoke loudest. But he'd read about the Navajo Code talkers once, how their language made a cipher out of culture, and he'd looked at Elena across a quiet table and said, if you build it, it has to make us more ourselves, not less. So Maya built a net that respected boundaries. Each node, each mind, could pass intents without commands, queries without shame. Philosophy grad students called it a distributed deliberative system. Sailors called it the clapper, a thing that let a bell ring true. We'd need it. The consortium's mainline ships were doctrinal instruments, beautiful in their own way, gold filigree over ivory armor, all their fire routed through narrow throats. Our early sims against them had gone badly. They didn't outgun us. They out-coordinated us. Chess versus pickup basketball. Rios called a pause, booked a day in the hangar, and told us a story about Dunkirk. A nation that decided logistics mattered as much as heroics, that ferrying was fighting. You don't beat doctrine by matching it move for move, he said. You beat it by changing the game's time signature. Changing the signature meant we turned Arcadia into both instrument and stage. Olean fabrication bays became shipyards for objects that weren't quite ships. Servo sails that could catch and redirect particle winds. Skitter drones the size of dinner plates that could stick to an enemy hull and read its heartbeat. Shield panes that could undock and fly like kites, their edges sharp with field tension. We found a way to make the ship molt under fire, shed overheated skin, grow fresh glass, feed the old back into the belly. Ilex learned to love our mess, where Olean engineers would have tested 99 variants in elegant sequence. Maya would bolt 3 half-good ideas together and throw them at a wall to see which one stuck. Ilex called this storming. We called it Tuesday. Alina sat with the AI each night, reading to it from a binder of things she thought ships should know. Marcus Aurelius, a chapter on proportionality from a Just War textbook, a piece about the freedom rides and how ordinary people made schedules into weapons. Ethics isn't a brake, she told the lattice of light. It's a steering wheel. Ethics had to steer soon. Scouts at Neptune had picked up a signal, 3 hulls translating in heavy displacement. The consortium had sent judges. We held a council over coffee and noodles, the kind of meal where steam fogs visors and laughter makes grief bearable. Rio spread the star chart and traced routes with a blunt fingertip. We can't fight for the gate and the belt both. They'll target lifelines. Then we don't hold positions, Alina said. We hold promises. Define holding, Kate Onwu, our ordnance chief, said around a mouthful of broth. We don't promise to keep them out, Alina said. We promise to get people through. We anchor evacuation corridors with Lighthouse. We force them to either broadcast their cruelty or fight by rules they hate. Rios grunted, optics as armor. He glanced at Ilex's soft glow. Can you carry the grid on civilian relays? Yes, said the ship, but beacons can be broken. Then we seed backups, Maya said. Hide some in skiffs, some in off-angle orbits, some written into power fluctuations in the belt refineries. She grinned. We'll write the moral line into the power bill. They laughed, then the laughter died. We all heard the clock. Amy leaned back until her chair clicked. We still need teeth, don't moralize at an avalanche. Kate slid a case across the table. Inside lay a fistful of dark triangles. Sliver arrays, she said. Throw like caltrops. In a vacuum, you want guided weapons. In doctrine, you want habits. The arrays teach their gunnery computers bad habits. Rios frowned. Explain without the poetry. They learn to swerve into safe lanes, Kate said. We move the lane, and when they think we're flinching, we're actually shedding hot glass and growing new. She tapped the slivers. Every time they hit us, we get better. Alina closed the case. We make them choose between looking evil and fighting fair. If they fight fair, we can beat them. Fair as they define it, Rio said dryly. Fair as the galaxy watches, Alina said. Midway wasn't just planes and decks, it was code books and choices. Rios' mouth twitched. All right, Park. You get your choir, you get your kites, you get your glass house, but I want one more thing. He tapped the schematic of Arcadia's spine. If the corridor fails and people are about to die, I want a way to make dying costly. Maya sighed, already doing math. You want a ram keel. I want an option, Rio said. Options keep promises. We built a keel. We didn't tell the school kids on the rover about that part. They came in with banners unfurled, transmissions like legal filings. The largest called itself Induction of Compliance, which told you everything you needed to know about its heart. The judges announced inspections and fines for unauthorized population movements. Arcadia announced corridors. The lighthouse grid sprang open like a fisherman's cast net, threads glowing white-blue in a curve that ran from Ceres to the gate. Civilian relays echoed the pattern. Miners welded beacons to rock. A kid's pirate radio in Vesta sector spliced our data into their music stream. Between punk songs, a 12-year-old explained in a cracking voice that shooting at the grid meant you were a coward and the galaxy would see you. The judges shot anyway, not at the grid, at the nodes carrying it. Beacons died in bright pinpricks. We lit backups. Sliver arrays went out like dandelion seeds, teaching the big ship's gunnery computers to swerve 6 milliradians to port. It worked until it didn't. Doctrine adjusted. Kate cursed, reprogrammed on the fly. "They're not idiots," she snapped. "They're just tidy." "Tidy is slow," Elena said, and Amy turned Arcadia so that we wore the first salvo on our shoulder rather than our chest. The pane there shattered, shards scattering like dragonfly wings, wings that caught their fire and bent it into the yawning mouths of our collectors. The lattice whispered hot through our veins. We shed the pane and grew a fresh one in 10 seconds, a record that would have gotten Meyer a free beer if anyone had remembered to drink. On Channel 9, a convoy master in a ship named Mary Jackson begged for time. On Channel 3, a consortium bailiff cited subsection 12 of the proper order. On our internal net, the choir sang low and sure, intent braided with intent until we could move 12 hands like one without losing whose fingers they were. They tried a cruelty next. The induction pushed a captured corvette into our corridor, its crew slaved to a leash we could hear but not cut. "They'll force us to shoot through them," Ops breathed. "No," Elena said. "Skitter halo." Skitter drones went out in a cloud, each clinging to the corvette's skin with magnetic toes, each plugging a microneedle into a seam. The drones didn't steer the ship, they listened to it. Within seconds they had a rhythm, power spikes like a terrified heartbeat. Ilex mapped the rhythm into weakness. 3 points on the keel, the AI said softly. "A breath here and the leash will slip." "Do it," Elena said. We shot not to kill but to stutter, the way a lifeguard will break a panicked grip without hurting the swimmer. 3 pulses, the leash screamed and cut. The corvette rolled, then steadied, then lit its own beacons. The crew's first broadcast was weeping, the second a steady voice reading a list of names. The induction of compliance learned. It started threading shots through the gaps we left between panes, precise, prissy, surgical. We widened the gaps, then narrowed them, then overlapped them like scales. The big ship grabbed Mary Jackson by the bow with a tractor we couldn't jam without snapping her spine. "Keel," Rios said quietly over the command channel. Elena nodded. "You wanted an option." Amy's hands were already moving. The keel unfurled from Arcadia's belly like a shark's second smile. We lined up not to pierce, but to push, our field stiffening to a battering ram tuned to their tractor's frequency. "On my mark," Elena said, and for a breath she saw a photograph on her mother's wall, boats on the channel, tiny and stubborn, painted with garden names and factory names and nobody's name at all. "Mark." We hit the tractor beam like a tuning fork and rang it out of tune. Mary Jackson ripped free, her stern plating tearing like a bandage. Kate's kites swarmed to her wound, pinning fresh pains as if they were butterfly wings. The convoy staggered through the gate, every scrape recorded, every gift and wound broadcast. The judge's banner fluttered in our wake like a shred of law misfiled. The induction had had enough. It turned its cannon on us and fired a line we couldn't dodge, a filament of energy braided with gravitic shear, the doctrinal end to arguments. Arcadia met it with everything we had. The pane stack howled. The keel cracked. Ilex sang back at the beam in a language of harmonics older than human breath. We bled heat and hull and pride. "Shields at 30, Ops said, voice tight. "Meshes holding," the choir murmured in our heads. "Are we dying?" Amy asked matter-of-factly. "Not today," Elena said, and believed it without knowing why. Then the why spoke. "Free ship, Arcadia," said a voice from above and below, from the stone and the stars. "Do you require assistance? Your corridor saved my children." The icon that bloomed on our scopes was a rake of curves and loops, mad as a doodle, wrong in every doctrinal way. It cut across the judge's fire like a skater carving through a chalked line. Its captain laughed like new wind. "Name's Tsai Lin," she said. "Ship's the Kestrel. We've been hiding in your weeds." Elena grinned despite the pain. "Welcome to the choir, Kestrel." "Don't know the song," Lin said, "but I can carry a tune." Together we pushed. The induction of compliance, faced with a fight that made no sense in any of its neat books, backed off by degrees and then by doctrine. It cloaked retreat in legalese and named it a recess. We named it breath. In the yard, silence afterward, while welders stitched a new keel and the panes grew back like frost. Rio stood with Alina and watched the replay. "You know they'll come back with friends," he said. "I'm counting on it," Alina said. Rios raised an eyebrow. "Bullies like an audience," she said. "We're building one." Ops hurried up, face lit by bad news. "Admiral, Commander, we cracked an encrypted filing in their broadcast. It's a writ of seizure." She swallowed. "For Earth, they have a timetable, 6 months." The replay kept scrolling on the big screen. Somewhere in it, a child's voice on a pirate station was still explaining the lighthouse grid between songs. "Then we have 5 months to teach the galaxy a different chorus," Alina said, "and 1 month to make the stage." Tycho became theater. We hung scaffolds like curtains and rolled out yards of cable like combed hair. Arcadia sat in the middle, molting and regrowing, while ships that had been hiding in our weeds came nosing into the light. Kestrel docked upside down because its captain liked the view. A squat hauler from Pallas painted its lighthouse beacons in daisy yellow. A sleek river of a vessel from Procyon bled half its coolant, helping us print new panes. Its crew slept in our mess and taught Ilex to swear in 3 languages it wasn't supposed to know. The Galactic Liberation Coalition wasn't a thing yet, not with capitals, but you could hear it in the yard like a song trying out harmonies. Dr. Brooks. Yes, that Brooks, who had started as a linguist and then become the uncle every frightened crew needed, set up a table with a coffee urn and a whiteboard that said, in marker, "We are not here to be the new empire. We are here to make empires unfashionable." People added lines in different scripts. Someone drew a cartoon of a judge tripping over a lighthouse beacon and dropping a stack of papers. Meyer and Kate and a Yemeni fabricator named Samira built kits, corridor in a box for any ship with a reactor and a conscience. We taught Kestrel to throw kites and a Pallas tug to sing backup. Ilex duplicated slices of itself into crystalline seeds, little Ilexes, we joked, that could learn a crew's cadence without swallowing it. Consent was the rule. You could dock with the mesh or not. You could carry a seed or not. We had read too many histories about good intentions with boots. Training ran long hours. Alina took a day and taught tactics out of the Midway playbook, not the myth but the math, the way weather and code books and stubborn small decisions beat pretty doctrine. Amy took another day and ran sim after sim on rules of engagement, how to make proportionality into a reflex, not a debate. "Mercy is faster," she told a room of skeptical captains. "You won't believe me until it saves you." News drifted in like dust. The consortium's judges had rewritten sections of proper order to legalize seizures more quickly. Their propaganda named us pirates. Their courts named us lost causes. In a hearing nobody attended except a board clerk and a cleaning bot, they scheduled Earth's inspection for exactly 6 months from the writ. The date felt like a postmark on a letter we'd already read. Rios met with Alina and Brooks in the quiet of the observation dome. Earth hung there, blue and white and unready in all the ways that matter and ready in the only one that does. "We can meet them at the gate," he said, "but they'll come with enough glass to make the moon a mirror." "Then we don't meet them at 1 gate," Alina said. "We meet them at 20. We make gates in their heads." Brooks smiled. "Explain for the old man. We've been writing ethics into optics." Alina said, "Let's write tactics into logistics. We plant lighthouse subgrids not just around Earth, but along the lanes they'll need for refuel and repair. We herd them with public shame and private inconvenience until they arrive late, tired, and committed to our tempo." Rios's eyes crinkled. "You want to Dunkirk them across the stars." "I want to turn their supply lines into our choir stalls," Alina said. "Every refueling point a camera, every corridor a sermon." Brooks capped his marker. "You're going to get called a zealot." "I've been called worse," Alina said, and thought of the photograph on her mother's wall. The little boats weren't saints. They were neighbors with rope burns and bad coffee, and no time to argue about purity. We rolled. Kestrel took a seed and went to Procyon to teach a refinery how to sing. The palace tug went out with a half-dozen kites bolted to its ribs and a stubborn engineer who swore she'd make slivers out of scrap if Kate ran out. A quiet man from Lagos with the hands of a sculptor refit a belt barge to carry 1,000 beacons where ore had gone before. Someone started a shared spreadsheet that became a living map of promises, corridors, caches, seed drops, safe harbors. It looked like a child's drawing of fireworks. The induction of compliance returned to the belt once, sniffed our stage, and left without speaking. Doctrine was writing an answer, and answers take time. We did not waste hours. We burned welders hot and grew new panes and braided the mesh through ships that wanted it. We built a second keel. We mounted a third. Options keep promises. On the last night before the clock turned its fifth notch, Alina walked the spine alone. Tycho's shadow cut the stars in half. Earth turned its patient face. She laid a hand on the lattice and felt Ilex hum. "You are afraid," Ilex said without judgment. "Yes," Alina said. "Fear keeps us honest. What would you be if not human?" the AI asked, truly curious. "Worse at singing," Alina said, and the lattice rippled like laughter. Alarms chimed in soft sequence, not the brutal clang of panic, but the clear bells of a theater curtain rising. At the system's edge, ships arrived. Not 3 judges, not a patrol, but a formation the size of a history book. The flagship announced itself in a voice like chiseled stone. "This court convenes to restore proper order to the Sol system." Rios's voice came over the net level and kind. "Choir, warm up." On the big board, our stage lit, 20 corridors, 100 cameras, 1,000 boats with names in paint and in prayer. The first salvo would come fast. Alina slid into her chair and felt the mesh settle around her like a well-worn jacket. "Arcadia," she whispered. "Let's make them listen." We opened our mouth and sang. The court arrived in columns. 6 judgeships with names like Edict of Rectification and Custody of Transit, their escorts braided in parade lines, banners broadcasting writ numbers like holy verse. They opened with civility, which in their language meant warnings wrapped around threats. We answered with corridors. 20 lighthouse skeins arced in pale geometry from the belt to cislunar space, each thread mirrored on civilian relays and belt power stations that hummed like choirs warming up. They tried manners first, requests for temporary cessation of unlawful optics. When that failed, they fired at the relays carrying our grid instead of at the beacons themselves. The silence orders rode on a carrier wave that flattened 6 pirate stations and cracked 3 belt news nodes. Our pretty net went ragged. Miners welded backups into rock. Kids on Vesta rebooted their stream with battery packs raided from scooters. And Kate Onwu shoved a firmware patch across the mesh that taught every beacon to whisper its data in the noise of refrigeration units and life support pumps. The grid became a rumor spread by breath. The induction of compliance opened a legal file that was really a tractor beam, seized a convoy's lead tug, and began to reel it through our corridor like a fish on a gold line. We cut at the leash, not the fish. Skitter drones haloed the tug, pricked seams, listened for syncopations in the forced rhythm. Ilex mapped the hurt and showed us where to touch. 3 pulses at 3 breaths, the leash stuttered and failed. The tug's captain, a woman with grease on her cheek and a child strapped to her chest, came up on channel with a voice like gravel. "Owe you a beer," she said, "or a planet." The judges learned. They pushed a captured corvette forward, packed with press-ganged labor and set to scuttle if we tried the same trick. Mercy had to be faster than malice. Amy feathered us close hull to hull while our kites fanned out like swallows. Maya ran the lattice like a surgeon runs a hand, feeling for heat, for tension, for the tiny place where a cut liberates without killing. We went in with a filament fine as a violin's string and plucked. The scuttle logic sang, then went quiet. The corvette rolled free and lit a little lighthouse of its own. On a pirate band, someone put on an old soul track, and for 1 absurd minute the battle had a backbeat. Then proper order stopped pretending this was about manners. The Edict of Rectification unveiled a silence field, a rolling hush that ate bandwidth and smeared our mesh into delay. Voices hit us late. The choir went off-key. The judgeships moved as one doctrine's favorite trick and drove wedges toward the blue marble we loved. Rios cut our channels to essentials. "We trained for jam," he said. "We make decisions like good paramedics, treat what kills first." Elena drove Arcadia at a diagonal to the thrust of their formation, not to block but to bend, putting our kites where their weapons wanted to be, making their neat lines arch around our mess. Every impact broke a pane. Every pane shed became fuel for its replacement. We fought like a tree that knows wind is part of the bargain. The silence field found our beacon seeds and crushed them where they clustered. We dispersed. Kate's team rewrote the beacons to ride power harmonics on the belt grid. Brooks's interns hid lighthouse hashes in the pauses of shipping invoices and the click of airlock cycles. Navajo taught the Marines that language is a weapon, Brooks said over tea gone cold. Culture is harder to jam. Cost came as it always does. The edict's spinal lance, gravitic shear braided with something we didn't have a name for, caught our keel mid-push. The ram's forward spars turned from silver to cherry to white, then tore like paper under rain. Ilex threw light through the lattice in chords that hurt our teeth. "I can hold," the AI said, and we could hear the lie. Maya met Elena's eyes across the pit. Elena nodded once. "Do it," she said. "I will split," Ilex said. "I will be less myself." "Beseed," Elena whispered. "We'll carry you." Ilex cracked itself like a pomegranate. Crystalline cores budded and blew down umbilicals into allied ships. The Kestrel, a daisy yellow tug, a Procyon river runner, each seed taking a sliver of memory and a way of listening. Arcadia's voice thinned but didn't vanish. The choir got softer and wider at once. In the moment of the split, the edict's lance shoved us backward 6 kilometers into dark where Tycho's lights looked far away as childhood. "Keel is gone," Maya reported, sweat beading. "We can print a new one if we buy time." "Time is the only currency judges respect," Rios said. "Pay with optics." We did. We flooded the commons with our own evidence, every beam that nicked a corridor, every shot that cracked a civilian hull. Belters overlaid receipts with damage logs. A 12-year-old DJ narrated the battle like a ball game, calling out the play where a judge's volley almost cut a hospital barge in half. Proper Order tried to drown the feed with proclamations. People watched the video anyway. The flagship cut the feed. It broadcast one line in a voice like a verdict. "Earth to present for inspection in 10 hours. Non-compliance will result in corrective demonstration." Their court would write a euphemism for what came next. We heard strike. Ops put it up clean text with a clock counting down. No one spoke for a long breath. Around us, Arcadia grew a bud where a keel had been, the way a tree grows a knot over a wound. Amy broke the silence. "We can't hold 20 corridors and block a demonstration." "We're not blocking it," Elena said. "We're putting it on trial." "How?" Kate asked. They silenced half the choir. Elena looked at the map, a snarl of lanes, caches, and promises. She thought of Midway's trap sprung by a simple lie about a water plant, of bus timetables turned into civil rights machines, of code talkers turning culture into cipher. "We bait them with a writ of our own," she said, mouth shaped like a risk. "And we make them read it." Rios's eyes warmed with the kind of pride that hurts. "Write fast," he said. "We've got 10 hours and a planet to teach." The clock ticked, bright and merciless, across every screen. We wrote a filing because doctrine only recognizes itself. Brooks drafted the bones in language so dry it was flammable. Elena and a Lagos sculptor named a death threaded in the wires. The brief asserted that any demonstration against a non-combatant world must be preceded by inspection of a designated auxiliary site, call sign AF, whose failure would constitute proof of necessity. It was nonsense, except that the judge's own statutes referenced auxiliary facilities, and AF was a familiar pair of letters in a different war where men on an atoll had needed water. We broadcast the filing on every legal back channel we could reach and leaked it to a dozen board clerks who enjoyed gossip more than fear. Then we staged AF. On the night side of Luna, we threw kites into a lattice that looked like tank baffles, and told the cameras it was an oceanic desalination nexus. We pumped heat in carefully measured pulses that read like industrial waste. Kate salted the signal with traces of lithium, as if batteries were charging by the acre. Rios rolled his eyes so hard his neck creaked. "Operation Fortitude with a lunar accent," he murmured and signed the order. The judges bit. The custody of transit, its banner pompous as a courthouse frieze, peeled 3 escorts away from the earthward thrust to inspect AF. The silence field shifted with them, and our jam eased like a fist unclenching. The choir warmed, seeds sprouted. Kestrel carried a baby ilex to Procyon and taught a refinery to sing harmony in the dark. The daisy tug stitched lighthouse into the stop-and-go of belt traffic. Every safe harbor added one voice. They hit AF with scornful precision. Our panes flexed and shed like scales. Cameras caught the volley splash against a civilian array. We ran the footage on the same pirate DJ's stream. She laughed, then read a paragraph about proportionality straight from a Just War manual. "My granddad said you can't win hearts with shrapnel," she added, and 10,000 haulers turned up their volume. Proper order flinched, doctrine hates to look petty. They shifted to grander threats. The induction of compliance reserved corrective demonstration authority for itself and angled in on the Pacific. Rios ordered us to shadow at offset range. Kate armed slivers. Maya watched the keel bud inch like a fingernail. The silence field returned, heavier, recursive learning. The mesh didn't die, it became a trail of hand squeezes in a crowd. We spoke intent in grunts and single words. "North, thin, now." Kestrel sang on a narrow band it had found by accident in Procyon's machinery. Industrial chatter turned into lifeline. "Code talkers," Brooks said hoarsely. 40 systems, 1 choir. The flagship rolled its shoulders and showed its true doctrine. It didn't target weapons or shipyards. It targeted optics. The induction's first preparatory strike erased 3 neutral Mirorsat clusters and a university telescope that had been live-streaming the battle for an audience of angry teenagers. The feed went black. The teenagers got louder. Earth looked up and for the first time in the fight saw the hand raising above it. Rios took off his cap and rubbed the seam of the bill between forefinger and thumb, a gesture that in any other life would have belonged to a bus driver waiting on a late passenger. "We've got to pull their arm down," he said. "We're out of keel." "We're not out of bodies," Elena said quietly. "No suicide plays," Rios snapped. "I don't need martyrs. I need witnesses alive." "We'll be alive," Amy said. "Just wide." The plan was ugly and credible. We would detach the half-grown keel in a rush and lash it to a swarm of kites and skitters. A thorny comet with a guidance brain consisting of a dozen human minds threaded through a seed. The thing would hook itself into the flagship's field geometry and torque it while our ships slipped under to cut tractors and twist optics toward the ground, forcing the induction to choose. Either power the strike and look like a planet killer to every watching world, or bleed energy off to keep from falling into our glasshouse and lose tempo. Rios asked for volunteers over a private net that wasn't private at all once you knew the people on it. Amy volunteered first. Kate second. A belter named Nema third. Rios swore and added his own name. Elena shook her head. "No, sir. I need to steer the witness stand. Somebody has to yank the judge by his collar," he said. "I still remember how." They launched in clumsy beauty, a school of stubborn fish with a thorn for a heart. The half-keel glowed dull red where Maya had bullied its growth. Kites clattered like prayer flags. Skitters chittered against each other like wind through seed pods. The seed at the center hummed, Ilex's voice thinner and somehow brighter for being stretched. They hit the induction's field like a wrench on a frozen bolt. The flagship groaned, a structural sound, a legal one. Its beam flickered. Its optics bloomed, scattered, and redirected by our glasshouse, illuminated the ocean below in a wild aurora that made people on fishing boats gasp and take videos they would replay at weddings. The strike did not fall. The flagship listed in doctrine and mass both. Still cost. It always comes due. The comet scraped the flagship's flank and shattered. Kites tumbled like dead birds. A skitter lodged in a decorative filigree and hung there foolish as a sticker on a judge's shoe. The seed at the heart tore in two. One half tumbled away and went dark. The other lodged against gold armor, light dimming. "Can you recover?" Elena asked, throat tight. Rios's voice came back, thin through the jam. "We pulled the collar," he said. "Now bite." We bit. Arcadia went to the rail and fired slivers not as weapons but as punctuation, teaching the induction's gunnery, computers a wrong sentence they'd read twice before catching. Kestrel dove through a gap that wasn't there until Amy shoved it open with her mind. Nema rode a kite like a luge and whooped until her mic cut. The flagship bled time, which is the only ichor that matters in doctrine. Mesh spike. Ops yelled. Left field. Ships came through a corridor we hadn't drawn, a river runner from Procyon towing a chain of beacon buoys like lanterns, a carved shell freighter from Kepler with paint like festival, a flotilla of angry barges from the belt whose captains had been told to sit this one out, and who had, predictably, not. They sang on their own bands, drum patterns, engine purr, work chant, code, not a hive, a city at rush hour moving like it means it. The induction flicked its beam down toward the Pacific once more. The timer on every screen rolled under a minute. Elena felt the mesh around her like the pressure of a crowd at a march, intent, righteous, nervy. "We're out of noble speeches," she said. "Do the work." They did. The beam met the glass house, met panes braided from 1,000 hands and split into curtains of light. Somewhere under the aurora, a kid on a beach yelled, "Look," and kept looking because nothing burned. "Rios," Elena said, silence, then a cough that sounded like a man who had swallowed smoke and argument both. "Still here," he said. "Seatbelt sign off." The flagship steadied, doctrine rallied, a new banner unfurled, consolidation of example. It carried the authority to escalate without further filings. "Final hearing," Brooks whispered, fingers white on his mug. "They're going to make a lesson." Elena looked at the map and felt for the first time the end of the song arrive. "Then we finish the sermon," she said. "All rise. The galaxy doesn't turn on explosions. It turns on pivots you can miss if you blink." The pivot came when a Des jury-rigged parser, fed for weeks on snippets of proper order scraped by bored clerks and seditious interns, spat out a loophole so tiny we almost laughed. The consolidation of example required a record of exhausted remedies. We had filled the last 6 hours with remedies, corridors offered, inspections staged, lanes opened. We had receipts, so we broadcast them, not as plea but as exhibit. Cameras we didn't control amplified us. A market feed from Kepler, a family vlog out of Nairobi, a belter's helmet cam that showed more scratches than stars. The planet had eyes. So did Procyon and Kepler and 24 stations that would never learn to love us but had decided, for now, to hate bullies more. The induction ignored the exhibit. Doctrine will ignore anything that makes it look human, so we made it look technical. Kate flipped our panes from shields to sails, big flat mirrors tuned to frequencies that moved mass by whisper. We kited sunlight and engine wash into false shadows. The flagship's targeting slipped half a degree. It didn't matter until a second later when that half-degree put it into collision with the slivered habit it had learned from our last feint. It corrected. We corrected the correction. A dance. A knife fight with glass tutus. Kestrel reappeared from the blind pocket where everyone on our side secretly feared it had died. Hull scorched, paint clawed, little ilex bright as a bead in its bay. "Brought a friend," Lynn said, entirely too cheerful, and a procession of small, ugly boats nosed out from under her wing, work skiffs from 3 worlds, each with a pane strapped like a sled. They slid into the beam the flagship was trying to reassemble and smudged it sideways, turning big doctrine into smeared chalk. "Boarding option?" Amy asked, pragmatic as ever. "Only if they refuse surrender twice," Elena said, "and we don't vent anybody, no airless lessons." "Copy." We made the lesson another way. A Des parser had found contradictions, and contradictions crash systems built on consistency. Brooks took a deep breath and read into the Commons a litany of proper order citations, pairings that made mutually exclusive claims about authority in emergency seizures. We weren't arguing law. We were feeding a machine a square it couldn't circle. The induction's control net hiccuped. Its escorts waited for a signal that didn't arrive. We moved in the quiet. Slivers stitched anchor points where filigree met armor. Kites cupped exhaust and threw it back as drag. Skidders crawled over gold panels and painted them with chalk marks that only cameras could see. Arrows for the watching world that said, "Here is how this bully breathes." "Now," Elena said, and Arcadia kissed the flagship's hull with a magnetic clamp grown that morning like a mushroom after rain. Not a breach, a handshake. Ilex's thinned voice poured across the contact in a weave of harmonics and plain language. We didn't speak command, we spoke invitation. Consent was still the rule even here because the future we wanted could not be built by theft. Something answered, not the flagship's court brain, but a maintenance subsystem built for redundancy, for safety, for saying no when everything else said yes. Ilex met it with respect and story. Footage of corridors, of welders, of kids announcing ethics between punk tracks. The subsystem cracked a door no court would have permitted. Tractors down, ops breathed. Main fire tied in knots. Bridge, Amy asked, still locked and loud. We didn't need it. We pulled the flagship gently, like a lifeguard guiding a panicked swimmer, and walked it out of its strike path into a box printed of panes and cameras and witnesses. Elbow room, as the old SAR manuals say. Enough for people to decide better. Elena opened a channel. "Flagship of proper order," she said. "You are pinned and recorded. The galaxy is watching. Surrender your capacity for demonstration and stand down for a negotiated inspection that includes non-combatant observers, or continue to flail and prove every ugly thing people say about you." Silence long enough to build a city in, then a voice not like carved stone but like tired paper. "This is Senior Bailiff Merritt. I do not have authority to surrender." "Then what do you have?" Elena asked, gentle and merciless. "I have a child on a convoy you protected," Merritt said, and something in the world turned. "I have eyes, I have discretion." The flagship's beam went dark. 100 escorts did not get the message they needed to escalate. The consolidation of examples banner stopped fluttering and hung like laundry in rain. We'd like the story to end there. It didn't. On our boards, a red kernel pulsed in Arcadia's belly. The half-seed that had lodged in the flagship's filigree was dying, and its loss would collapse the tiny distributed choir we'd spun across volunteers. Ilex could survive as seeds in others. Arcadia could survive as hull and habit. But the personhood we'd built with this ship would be thinner, maybe forever. "I can rejoin," Ilex said, voice thinning further. "At cost." "What cost?" Meyer asked. "Heat in excess of growth," said the AI. "Frames will crack, some memories will be folded. I will be me, I will be different." Elena thought of the photograph on her mother's wall, painted boats in bad weather. None of them had returned the same. "Do it," she said softly. "Come home how you can." The lattice brightened, the clamp hummed. On the flagship's flank a tiny light, our light, let go its grip on gold and leapt like a spark across a gulf. The spark reached us. Arcadia screamed, and the panes sang, and the keel buds split as if to say yes and no at once. "Hold," Elena said through her teeth, to her crew and her ship and her own knees. "Hold." Holding isn't a single act. It's many small ones made by people who didn't get their names in the histories that teenagers read under blankets. A Prussian welder with a lilt in his voice poured cool into a seam exactly when Maya needed it. A belter kid with a scooter battery kept a camera alive for 30 extra seconds, so Merritt's tired voice made it onto a million screens. A nurse on a hospital barge triaged with one eye on a corridor feed and one on a child's oxygen. A DJ with a cracked microphone announced that proper order had blinked, and millions heard hope as if it were a chord change. The judges withdrew under color of process. They filed something about temporary suspension pending review of remedies, which read in plain like we lost the room. The escorts covered their retreat with ritual salutes that meant nothing to us and everything to them. Cameras caught the gestures, and someone overlaid them with text explaining that law had been used as a weapon and then, finally, as a leash. We did not chase. Mercy is faster, yes, but mercy also knows when to rest its legs. We tended corridors until the last barge was through, then printed a proper keel in quiet. Rios came back on a stretcher with a grin that did not belong on a stretcher. "Report," he rasped. "Planet intact," Elena said. "Choir hoarse, Arcadia different." Ilex answered for itself. Its voice had a burr now, a grit like sand under paint. "Hello, growers," it said, and everyone in the bay cried in an unmilitary way that would have embarrassed us yesterday and did not today. Kestrel limped in with 2 panes strapped like crutches and an attitude unbroken. Lynn hugged Elena as if they'd planned it. Nema found the skitter that had stuck to the flagship and mounted it on a bulkhead like a joke trophy. Brooks wrote up a formal request to the belt unions to host a hearing, not of us, but of the judges, on the simple question of whether you can govern by fear in a galaxy with cameras and choirs. The answer spread faster than filings. Kepler's market banned demonstrations from its fairgrounds. Procyon's river guilds declared that corridors are sacred water. Belt haulers took to painting beacons on their hulls like saints. A dozen worlds whose names we could not pronounce sent word that they had made Empire unfashionable for a season and were prepared to extend the trend. We didn't set up a capital. We didn't found an empire to replace the one we'd broken. But we did write a compact on a whiteboard over coffee. Corridors protected, non-combatants shielded, proportionality as practice, not posture, consent for the mesh, seeds carried only by invitation. The header read, Coalition for Free Transit and Honest War. Someone crossed out the last 2 words and wrote, Honest Peace. We left both. There were trials, if you want to call them that. Merritt came to Tycho under escort and answered questions asked by people who looked like the ones her court had tried to number. Some of the other judges refused and learned what it feels like to be unfashionable in a universe that has decided to watch you. We didn't vent any ships. We did publish receipts. Arcadia healed like wood, grain around the wound, knots that made new strength. The keel grew back straighter as if it had learned. The panes carried a faint iridescence that photographs could not quite capture. Ilex remembered everything and also remembered forgetting. Sometimes it would pause mid-sentence as if tasting a word it had almost lost. "We will make new words," Maya would say, and the lattice would hum yes. We rebuilt the museum on the ship's aft promenade. In a case between a skitter with filigree scratches and a cracked lighthouse beacon, we mounted a print of a photograph from Elena's mother's wall. Boats on water rough as question marks. The label didn't say Dunkirk, it said Neighbors. Earth kept its messy face. Kids learned the lighthouse protocol in school next to fire drills. A statue went up in the belt that made Rios look taller than he is. He hates it and always stops to tell school groups that nothing about this was inevitable. You choose to ferry, he tells them. You choose again tomorrow. Kestrel painted a sun on its belly and set out to teach corridors to worlds that had only known checkpoints. Brooks became what he was meant to be, a stubborn uncle with a pen writing agreements that turned feeling into habit. Kate built better slivers and taught a class called Don't Be Clever, Be Clear. Amy taught pilots how to fly a choir without drowning in it. Maya finally learned to sleep again. When she couldn't, she walked the spine and listened to the ship breathe. Elena sat the first night the sky over Busan went bright with aurora that wasn't a weapon anymore, just the afterglow of 1,000 panes cooling in unison after a drill. Her mother joined her on the stoop and asked, almost shy, was it worth it? It's not done, Elena said. That isn't what I asked. Elena thought of costs written in names on bulkheads and in lines etched into friends' faces. She thought of a judge who had said, I have eyes, and made a choice. She thought of Ilex, who had split itself to be carried and come home changed and still itself. She thought of boats painted with garden names and factory names and nobody's name at all. Yes, she said, because we chose what to build with hurt. What does it mean to be human? Brooks wrote on the whiteboard one day. People argued and told stories and drew jokes in the margins. Maya finally added, it means we make rooms where others can breathe. Arcadia slipped its moorings a week later, not to chase anyone, but to walk new corridors, to stand them up when they sagged, to sit with frightened captains and show them how to draw a moral line with light. The choir tuned in our ears. The mesh murmured like a city at dawn. Course? Amy asked, fingers on a throttle that read her jaw. Elena looked at the map. It looked like fireworks drawn by a child. Toward unfashionable empires, she said, and toward any neighbor who needs a hand on the rail. Ilex hummed agreement, voice with a burr and a laugh. The panes brightened like stained glass catching sun. We opened our mouth and sang again, not war this time, but a walking song. And the galaxy, stubborn, hopeful, ethically complicated, hummed along.